Welcome, Neogenians, to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we're answering the question, could Earth be a prison? As we take a look at three different theories that say exactly that Earth is a prison and how to escape. And of course, we'll be giving the Neogenian perspective as always and using logic and reason to analyze these ideas. It's going to be good. We're going to be taking a look at ideas in ancient history and philosophy, and even some areas you might be surprised. It's going to be very good. So we're going to get started right away. But as always, please make sure that you like and subscribe. My channel is about raising consciousness, creating a new humanity and a new Earth. And when you hit like and subscribe, it spreads this information around. So please hit it so we can spread this around. Also, follow me on Spotify, my podcast, Dawn of the New Earth. Follow me there to also help spread the information on that platform. And remember, my new book is available right now, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. If you want to understand how to reach a higher consciousness rationally, this is where to start. It's the first book in the Neogenian series, and the second book is available for pre-order right now. Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind, will be available July 11th. Pre-orders are available right now, like I said. And remember, my friends, if you enjoy my work, consider becoming a member on YouTube or on Patreon. You can become a member on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video, and you can check out all the different perks that you get for doing that. You get access to all of our members only videos. There's a new one every single week. We're having one right after this video. You get access to our Discord server, the Citadel. You can get access to the Nexus Academy, which is where we have live Neogenian study groups and classrooms hosted by Neogenian presenters every Sunday. It's awesome. Check it all out, and it helps out the channel very much. All right, let's get started, my friends. Could Earth be a prison? Is this a prison planet? Are we trapped in this hellish dimension, or is it something else entirely? Well, we're going to take a look at three theories that say that Earth is a prison. And I'm going to be reading some excerpts from an article on medium.com. And this particular article that I'm going to be reading excerpts from is called Could Earth Be a Prison? And it's written by Patty Murphy. So, if you enjoy some of the excerpts that I read here, go check out Patty Murphy on medium.com. Go give him some claps. That's the Medium version of likes, and give him some support over there. But let's take a look at this. So Patty says, there is a theory that humans have been put on here, on Earth, put here to be observed and studied, like in a zoo. And we have little hope of escaping. And even in death, we're just reincarnated here again and again and again. So is that true? Are we some sort of weird experiment? Are we in some sort of zoo? Are we just being incarnated again and again and again? Are we in a simulation? What's going on here? And there's actually a lot of people throughout history that have talked about ideas like this. And like I said, we're going to take a look at three of them and be examining this whole thing through logic and reason. Now, of course, number one are the Gnostics. And if you watch my channel, I'm sure that you are familiar with the Gnostics and Gnosticism, and they absolutely believe that this reality is a prison and that we are trapped here. And this is a hellish dimension. For those who don't know who the Gnostics were, they were a heretical sect of Christians. And they were condemned by the church as blasphemers and heretics, and the church tried to destroy all their books, but they were not successful, and we have been able to recover many of their books, particularly in 1945, buried near the tombs of Egypt, known as the Nag Hammadi Library. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Gnostic theory, but for those who aren't, let's just give a little preview and then before we look at the other theories. So Patty writes, let me make sure that that is the person's name before I say it over and over. Patty Murphy. Yes, Patty. So Patty says, just after the death of Jesus, some of the first Christians were called Gnostics. They got the name from the word gnosis, which means knowledge or wisdom. Yeah, so this is all true. The word gnosis comes from the Greek word for knowledge or wisdom. And it says there were a fair amount of Gnostics with varying weird ideas. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say their ideas were weird. I think that their ideas, at least compared to modern Christianity, were highly intelligent. We read so much Gnostic literature, and you can see the very intelligent philosophical basis behind so much of these Gnostic texts. Now it says, some believed in being chaste and not reproducing because having sex captured God's light and brought it down to the dark world. This is true, and this is one of the things that I don't like about Gnosticism that this individual is pointing out. Now, not all Gnostics believe this, but some of them did. Gnostics essentially believed that this material world is a prison. The Cathars believed this as well. They were a medieval heretical Christian sect. But they believed, the Gnostics believed, that this earth is a prison. So many of them, not all of them, but some of them, believed that having intercourse was bad because if you were to have children, what you would be doing is trapping sparks from the divine light of the true reality into material bodies. Essentially, that if you were to have children, you'd be imprisoning souls. So a lot of the Gnostics were against reproduction and intercourse in general. Now, another reason why they were against intercourse is because they thought that you had to deny the physical world to escape this material world, this prison planet. They thought that you had to deny the material universe or else you'd be caught in the cycle of reincarnation. This is also something that I don't agree with, and I'll be explaining why at the end, why I don't believe that this is true. But this is what some of the Gnostics believed. And Patty continues by saying, others worshipped snakes because the snake in the Garden of Eden was from Sophia, sent to give knowledge to Adam. More on her below. So they did sometimes venerate the image of the serpent because they thought that the serpent was giving wisdom to humanity, which if you follow the Gnostic stories, I mean, that is true. From their allegorical perspective, the serpent represents wisdom. Now, not every Gnostic sect believed this, but a lot of them did. So one belief they did in common was that our world was created by the demiurge, a creator god, ignorant, malicious, and utterly inferior to the true God who sent Christ to the earth to save humankind from the demiurge's evil world. So I'm going to go kind of fast through the Gnostic section because I'm sure most of you are familiar with it because of here on my channel, but I do want to talk about it a little bit for those who might not be familiar, because this is a very important part of the history of humanity viewing Earth as a prison. They were very fundamental when it came to, really cementing this idea in the collective psyche. So, yes, the demiurge means creator, and he was seen as an evil being. So the creator God is evil in terms of Gnosticism. So the God of the Bible is associated with the demiurge. So the God of the Bible is evil, the demiurge, and the God of the Bible essentially is lying to humanity and has created a material world to act as a prison for souls. And why this being has done this is because he wants to be venerated as the one true God. But these souls are actually more powerful than him because he's a being of darkness. He's also known as the dim ruler because he's a being of shadow that has some power of light. The power of light is a creative force, but he's a being of shadow that has some power of light. But the beings from the realm of light are much more powerful than him. So what he wants to do is basically trick them into incarnating into material bodies where he can wipe their memories and keep them from remembering what they are so that they will worship him and serve him. And so Gnosticism is about gnosis, or realizing, coming to the self-knowledge that you are divine and that you are actually higher than this being so that you can escape from this being. And there's a lot of talk about how souls would be continuously trapped into material bodies, that the demiurge had servants known as archons that would take the souls and return them to bodies again and again and again. And it was only through understanding that you were actually higher than these beings that you could escape from them. But let's continue to see what Patty says here. So Patty says, the story goes that God, being the true God, the God of light, created Sophia, and she was pure knowledge and the syzygy of Jesus. But she got a bit lonely, and thinking she was as smart as God, she tried to invent a likeness. But she got it wrong, and she made the demiurge, a lesser god, who was the product of the rebellious and profane desire that had arisen within her. So this is more or less right, but there are some details here that are not completely accurate. So Patty says that God created, the true God of light created Sophia. One could say that this is true, but when we look at Gnostic cosmology, it's not really about the true God creating beings, but rather beings being emanations from this God. So this God is basically a mind of light, and all the beings of light are emanations from this mind, part of the divine structure of this mind. And these beings are known as eons. And Sophia was an eon of wisdom. So all these different eons were different parts of the mind of God. And they represented different functions, such as, wisdom or thought or intuition or feelings or whatever. All these different beings weren't really like created in the way that we think of how it's described in the Bible. They're structures of the divine mind. So Sophia was a structure of the divine mind, or an emanation from the source, the true God that represented wisdom. And it says she got a bit lonely, and thinking she was as smart as God, she tried to invent a likeness. So what actually happened here, it's a little different than what this person is saying. What actually happened is that Sophia wanted to create something herself, because essentially in this realm of divine light, everything had a pair. So for example, Sophia had a male counterpart, and everything was working in harmony, in pairs, which means in balance and order and equilibrium, according to the structure of the divine mind. So Sophia basically decided, hey, I want to create something on my own without my partner's consent and independent of the thought process of the structure of the mind of God. And so you could think of it kind of like, imagine a brain. In a brain, neurons are working together for the functioning of a brain. Well, imagine one of the neurons being like, you know what? No, I don't want to be a part of this. I want to do my own thing. And so that neuron is no longer working in accordance with the structure of the brain, or it starts to do its own thing. That's sort of similar. What's going on here is that the eonic realm is a realm of divine light, which represents the structure of the divine mind. Everything is working in pairs, in harmony, in equilibrium. And Sophia is the part of the mind that represents wisdom, but decides, hey, I want to do something on my own, apart from this structure and apart from my partner. I want to create my own thing. So that's what Sophia does. And when she does this, this is what gives birth to this being of darkness, the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, the shadow, the dim ruler, the being of shadow. Now, Sophia is venerated in Gnostic literature because essentially, after this happens, Sophia feels really bad about it, and her whole mission becomes to try and help humanity remember what they are so that they can escape the material world. I still don't really, it's funny, this individual sort of who wrote this is sort of picking out all the different things that I'm not a super huge fan of in Gnosticism. I like so much of Gnosticism, but these couple things. So I don't really like how in Gnosticism it's seen as a negative thing that Sophia wanted to create on her own. And I get why. I understand why from an allegorical perspective. It's like, oh, well, everything was in balance and harmony. This threw everything out of balance and out of harmony. And I get that, but I could see it where it could be misinterpreted or misconstrued as thinking that like, oh, free thinking is a bad thing. That's not what it means, but I could see how it could be misinterpreted as thinking that. Anyway, not a huge fan of that, but still, according to Gnosticism, that is what occurred. And it says, and so poor Sophia was horrified and kicked him or it out of heaven. It wasn't really heaven. It was the pleroma, the realm of divine light. It says our demiurge also got lonely and created the archons or rulers who helped him to create the material world we find ourselves in. Well, the demiurge didn't really get lonely. The demiurge wanted to rule over something. The demiurge wasn't like, oh, I'm so lonely, I want friends, so I'm going to make archons and I'm going to make human beings. No, the demiurge wanted to have slaves, essentially. It wasn't about loneliness. So he created the material world, one that is not the world of love, peace, and compassion, but a world full of desire, suffering, pain, or what the Buddhists call dukkha, or the Hindus Maya. The Gnostic belief was that we were imprisoned on this planet, and the only way we could stop being reincarnated into this mess of pain and general nastiness until the end of time was through gnosis, or attaining true knowledge of the true God. And this is correct. This is what the Gnostics believed. They believed that we were trapped in this world and that the material world was essentially designed as a trap. And so they believed that to escape this trap, we had to understand what we truly are. Now, of course, depending on the version of Gnosticism, the different Gnostic sects, they also had other rules. Like I said, some of them believed that you shouldn't have intercourse, or that you shouldn't just be engaged in material activities. Not all of them believed that, by the way. There was a group of Gnostics known as the Cainites, not the Canaanites, but the Cainites. And the Cainites had the opposite view. They viewed that you basically had to indulge in everything that the material world had to offer, so that you would have every experience that you possibly could, so that you wouldn't feel a pull to return to it. This was also reflected in the beliefs of the Carpocratians and the Marcellians, which were a branch of the Carpocratians, which was essentially the idea that instead of trying to detach from the material world, you would indulge in the material world to try and get all the knowledge and experience possible. This is not a perfect metaphor, but one metaphor would be like this. Okay? Imagine that you are starving and you're so hungry and you have this hunger and you go to a buffet, but you go to the buffet and you only eat 5 peas. You just eat 5 peas because, you know, I'm going to try and resist the urge to eat. I'm going to try and resist it. And so the Cainites and the Carpocratians their idea would be along the lines of, well, you're still going to be hungry, so you're just going to keep going back into that restaurant. You're going to keep going back to that buffet. But as long as you only eat those 5 peas, or however much you eat, it's a very small portion, you're going to keep coming back because you're never satiating that hunger. That's a bit how they viewed reincarnation. It's not a perfect metaphor, but a bit how they viewed it is that if you try and detach from the material world, you're just going to get pulled back into it because you haven't experienced those things that you desire to experience. And so their idea was sort of like that you eat as much as you can at the buffet, that you eat so much that you're sick to your stomach. So when people are like, hey, do you want to go to a buffet? You're like, oh, no, I feel like puking. I feel like vomiting. I don't want to. That's the last thing I want to do is go back to the buffet. So that was their idea, was you had to indulge as much as possible in the material world so that you could transcend it, essentially. So it's really, really interesting that you see that there's the same idea that this world is a prison planet, but you have 2 opposite ways to escape. One group says detach from everything. Another group says indulge in everything. So which is it? Which is the actual way to do it? Well, like I said, when we get to the end here, I'll be talking about the Neogenian perspective. We'll be looking at this through logic and reason and see what really makes sense. Patty says, I'm sure that this will sound familiar to anyone who knows anything about Buddhism and Hinduism, where both traditions are all about attaining enlightenment, nirvana, moksha, to break the cycle of rebirth. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, as how, you know, a lot of people always ask me, what do I think about Buddhism or Hinduism, etc. I think out of all the mainstream religions, Buddhism is the least problematic. For the most part, Buddhists are very peaceful and they keep to themselves. But I will be talking about an aspect of Buddhism that I feel is negative, which leads to negative consequences on the world. And let me actually make a note to myself to remind myself to talk about that. So that we can discuss some of the pitfalls in Buddhism. So, in my opinion, of course. So we've talked about the Gnostic idea, which most people from my channel should be fairly familiar with. But let's move on. So the Gnostic was one theory. The earth is a prison. Well, let's look at another. And now we're talking about Arthur Schopenhauer. So Arthur Schopenhauer was a philosopher. And he was an interesting philosopher, but I have a bone to pick with Schopenhauer. I'm not the biggest fan of Schopenhauer, and I'll tell you why. Because Hegel is my favorite philosopher. Hegel was a brilliant philosopher who believed that reality was an expression of the mind of God exploring itself through its own internal creation based on a rational structure. There's a lot more to it, but that's it in a nutshell. Now, Schopenhauer, however, hated Hegel. Schopenhauer hated Hegel so much, they both worked at the same school, and Schopenhauer would schedule his classes at the same time as Hegel's so that students would have to choose. Are you going to go to Hegel's class or are you going to go to my class? And that's just that's such a dick thing to do. That's such an very, not cool, man. But you know, it turned out not very many people showed up to his class because everyone wanted to go to Hegel's. We'll talk about that a little more. But who was this guy? What did this guy think about? So let me read what Patty said. Patty says, if we fast forward to modern times, Arthur Schopenhauer, the 18th century German philosopher, wrote quite a bit about what the driving force of humanity was. We aren't chasing happiness. We're chasing alleviation from the constant suffering we experience daily. Okay, so he thinks that reality is suffering and that we're trying to escape the suffering. Schopenhauer compared our lives to be like a living penal colony, being trapped in a prison. None of us chose to come here, and we're not allowed to leave. We're limited by the constant confines of time, like the walls of a car. The walls of a car crusher closing in on us, and every day we survive means we're just one day closer to death when we awake the following morning. So let me just read a little more what Patty says, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on this. Life, according to Schopenhauer, was a constant stream of tragedy, misery, and worry, and our need to find pleasure was just a way to temporarily escape the constant pain of existence. Schopenhauer's idea of who created this life was more in line with the Gnostics' demiurge than of modern-day Christianity, who paint a picture of a benevolent and all-loving hippie dude who loves us. Anyway, let me actually talk to you about this. So Schopenhauer had a very pessimistic view of reality. And he believed that we're all driven by what he called the will to live. So one of his books is called The World as Will and Representation. So essentially, he believed that all reality, all existence was a blind will, a striving. And all like this monster of energy, this blind, that reality was like this blind monster of energy or will. And its entire focus was on surviving, or basically preserving its existence. So, according to Schopenhauer, there really is no grand meaning or purpose to life. It's just this force that wants to survive and perpetuate its existence at all costs. And so that's what reality is. That's what existence is. And he believes the world as will and representation, meaning that everything we experience and everything that we are is a representation of that or an expression of that. Basically, because this world is this monster of energy that wants to survive and perpetuates itself, we're part of that. And so we're engaged in that process, meaning that our whole life and all our striving is just about this will to continue our existence, even though it's one of constant pain and suffering. So basically, we're always chasing after something and we're never satisfied by it. But this constant chasing, it leads to a lot of suffering. When we get what we want, well, what happens? We just start wanting something else, and it keeps us in a cycle of stress and pain. And so he saw the entire world full of this conflict and dissatisfaction, and that pleasure was just like a brief break from all the pain, and that life is entirely about struggle and competing with each other. And it's basically a very pessimistic philosophy that sees reality as this blind being that is just engaged in this process of perpetuating its own existence. And it's even just consuming itself as well. This being is just engaged in this process of suffering and consuming its own being. And you can see an example of that as like when we eat animals, we are causing suffering, we are causing harm. I don't eat animals, I'm a vegan, but you get what I mean. Causing suffering and causing harm as you are consuming these entities to perpetuate your existence, and that basically all reality expresses itself in this constant cycle of suffering for no other reason than to perpetuate its own existence, but its existence is one of suffering. So according to Schopenhauer, it would be much better to just not exist at all, because we're just caught in this like eternal cycle of suffering, and we're perpetuating our own existence through this. So he didn't have a really great, not a very positive philosophy, but what did he say about what we can do about all this? Well, he believed things like enjoying art and beauty. When we get lost in music or a book or a painting, we can forget about our troubles and find some peace. It's like a little escape from constant desire and constant suffering. He also believed in simplifying our life, that by reducing wants and desires and letting go of material things, we can also lessen suffering, and being kind and compassionate to others, because we realize that others are going through struggle and suffering as well. So by realizing that we're all in this together and being more empathetic, we can try and alleviate some of that suffering to make life a little bit better for us and everyone around us. But in general, you can see it's Schopenhauer basically was a very depressing version of Buddhism, a very philosophical, depressing version of Buddhism, where Schopenhauer is basically like, this world is suffering, this world is pain, this world is a prison, none of us chose to come here. There's nothing we can do about it. All we can do about it basically is try and enjoy the little pleasures, try to simplify our lives, and try to be nice to those around us. But basically, everything sucks. So Schopenhauer did have some interesting ideas, but I don't particularly care him, especially because he was such a dick to Hegel. But we're going to get to another one of these theories in just a moment. But I want to just take a second to talk about Hegel a little bit to see where it's interesting, because Schopenhauer believed in reality as being this blind will that was constantly just striving to perpetuate its own existence, the will to live. Now, Hegel had a much more positive philosophy in that he saw reality as a mind. a structured mind. Remember how we talked about Gnosticism, and Gnostics believed the source, the one, the true God of light, was this divine mind that was structured in a certain way? Hegel's ideas are very similar to that, except put in a rational and logical foundation. Hegel believed that reason was the way to truth. So he believed that reality was a mind. All existence, all everything was a mind. And this mind was structured according to a rational and logical pattern. What does that mean exactly? It can be kind of confusing at first, but an easy way to understand this is thinking about a computer code. A computer code is a kind of like a rational structure. So he basically believed that reality was like a structured code, but not a computer code, a mental structure. And he believed that reality, or what he called the idea, generated within itself the physical world as being an expression of itself. And a way to understand this is how a computer code could, let's say, generate a video game. So Hegel believed that reality generated within itself the physical world. And then through human consciousness, it inserted itself into that world it generated for itself. The analogy here is, imagine you remember we have the computer code, then we have the video game world it generated. Well, now imagine the computer code being like, hey, I want to experience this world, so I'm going to place myself in that game as a game character. And so now the code is experiencing the world that it generated through that video game character. This is how Hegel viewed reality, in that all of us are expressions of the mind of the absolute, and we are engaged in this process of coming to self-knowledge of what we are. So according to Schopenhauer, reality is just a blind will to survive. According to Hegel, that's not the case. According to Hegel, reality is engaged in understanding itself. And this is closer to ideas like in Kabbalah, where in Kabbalah, we are helping God evolve, basically. In Kabbalah, everything is an emanation from Ein Sof, or the boundless realm. And essentially, we're all expressions of the light of God, meaning that we are all parts of God. And as we learn and understand and grow, God is evolving through us because God is us and what we are. That's similar to that idea. Hegel believed that we were all beings that are engaged in understanding ourselves and reality. And eventually we would come to the understanding that we're God. Eventually we'd be like, oh, wow, I understand that we are existence. And this is what Hegel called absolute knowing. And absolute knowing was essentially what he called the unification of subject and object, which is about realizing that what is out there is actually in here. What seems like external and physical is actually internal and mental. Easy way to understand this is through a dream. If you are sleeping and you're having a dream, in your dream, objects seem like they're out there. And you believe that they're out there. But when you become lucid, you realize, oh, no, wait, this is all in my mind. It seems like things are out there, but it's actually all in my mind. Hegel's absolute knowing is basically like becoming lucid and waking reality and realizing, oh, everything that seems like is out there is actually a projection of the mind. Not like a personal dream, but a collective dream, a shared dream that we're all having together. And so Hegel's idea is much more positive than Schopenhauer's, because Schopenhauer's was just like, we're screwed, nothing you can really do about it. And Hegel's idea was, this is all part of evolving and coming into the knowledge that we are God. So I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. Again, let me make another note to myself. Okay. But I wanted to lay that foundation because I want to touch on that in just a moment. So Schopenhauer was a second theory. Let's take a look at a third. And this is an interesting one. Okay. So this is by Philip K. Dick. And Patty says, we also have the case of science fiction writer and mystic Philip K. Dick, who wrote extensively on the prison planet idea. Now think about this. This is kind of a twist on the idea here. Philip believed that the world could be seen as a prison because of the hidden orders that govern it. So this is a lot different from the other theories. So Patty says, not exactly in an Illuminati style thing, but more like a class war idea of the hierarchy never changing and the poor remain poor and powerless while those in charge will do anything to remain in charge. This can be illustrated with his phrase, the empire never ended. Philip thought that humans were trapped in a world of illusions and lies, and these lies and illusions were maintained by those in power, human or otherwise, to control and manipulate humankind. So Philip's idea was that we are in this slave-like system because of a class war, because of a hierarchy. And so this is kind of a switch from a metaphysical idea of a prison planet to more of a class and economic idea of a prison planet. In that, let's take a capitalist society, for example, where you have the rich billionaire elite who are at the top and dictate how the world runs, while those who are poor and are at the bottom have to essentially be the slaves or the prisoners of these elite. And you can think about the idea of having to work a 9-to-5 job, having to break your back, working a 9-to-5 job just so you can make enough to survive and put food on your plate at the end of the day, being so exhausted that you barely have any time to work on your own growth and understanding. And many people have to work more than one job just to survive in this world. And so you can see from this perspective, we live in a prison planet because of the capitalist society that we live in and the economic structure that creates an oligarchical elite who rule through wealth and keep the poor in a state of slavery, submission, and servitude. So you see, it's a lot different, but it's also this prison planet theory, just in another way, another way of looking at it, another perspective. So Patty says, I mean, from a personal point of view, I'd have to agree with the Buddhist and Hindu idea of dukkha and maya. We know for a fact that we can't even see the reality truly around us. Humans only see 0.0035% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So that's a very important thing to realize, and a lot of people don't understand this, is that what we see out there is 0.0035% of what's actually out there. In other words, the visible light spectrum in the electromagnetic spectrum, the portion of visible light, is only 0.0035% of what's out there. So we are experiencing a minuscule fraction of what's going on in existence just with regard to the electromagnetic spectrum or light waves, let alone all the other factors that contribute to our knowledge and understanding and experience of existence. So Patty comes to the conclusion that we have to accept that we don't know what's going on in the world around us. We're blind and all kinds of things could be happening and we wouldn't know about it. He says, before I ask you to take a leap of faith with me, let's sum up. He says, the Buddhists, Hindus, and Gnostics all believe that we're deluded by the world around us and that what we see isn't true reality. We're trapped by our vices and our senses, and the only way to get free is to achieve some type of greater knowledge. The Hindus and Gnostics would say you need to experience a oneness with God. For this, the Buddhists would say to just achieve a oneness with all, but they'd all agree that this place isn't what it seems. All right, so let's talk about this. What's actually going on here? So one thing that's really critical to understand is that what we believe about reality shapes our actions and thus shapes how reality actually is, because reality is shaped by our actions. Everything begins as an idea in the mind, and that expresses itself in the material world. The world is the way it is because of choices that humans have made that began as ideas in their minds. And so we have to be very careful about what ideas we have about reality. So, for example, if we believe that this is a prison planet, what is the natural consequence of believing that this place is a prison planet? How do we escape? That's what the focus then moves to. If we believe we're in a prison, this moves to, well, how do we escape this prison? And so, for example, Buddhists are obsessed with detachment. And I have been to, certain Buddhist meetups where I've seen a lot of the people there just obsessed with, oh, this world is suffering, this world is horrible. What can we do to escape? What can we do to detach? And so their entire focus becomes on how to detach from the world. They're obsessed with detaching from the world. And they often praise and venerate, certain Buddhist monks that say, like, meditate for 12 hours a day. They'll be like, oh, wow, this monk meditates for 12 hours a day. They're so enlightened and they're reaching Buddhahood and they're going to reach nirvana. Well, what does nirvana mean? Nirvana literally means extinguishment, to snuff out. And so a lot of Buddhist teaching is about trying to be snuffed out, essentially, so that you're no longer in this cycle of incarnation because they see this world as suffering. But here's the point. Do we live in a prison planet? Kind of, but it's not a prison planet permanently. It only is that way temporarily because that's what we have collectively chosen and created for ourselves by living in a world that is conditioned by hatred, elitism, sexism, homophobia, religious intolerance, all of the evil, vile hatred ideas, all the evil, vile hatred. Remember, everything that I'm talking about, these are all ideas in the mind. Racism is an idea. Sexism is an idea. Violence stems from these ideas. And so we have created this hellish planet. It's through our creation that this world is hellish. And so the problem is that people see this and they automatically think, well, okay, how do we escape? And so they become obsessed with escapism. They become obsessed with reaching nirvana or reaching heaven or ascending to the source. And while everyone is focused on how to escape and detach, the world remains in shambles. And you are just going to be continuously relocalized on this planet over and over and over again, because in truth, this world isn't a prison. It's a place to learn, grow, understand, express, and transform. When you realize that we are God, it's about transforming ourselves and transforming the world. It's not about escaping. Gods don't run away. Gods create and transform. Can you imagine a God being like, oh, this sucks so much, I just want to extinguish myself? And no, it's about transforming the world, transforming consciousness, transforming this experience so that we can build the kingdom of heaven right here on earth right now. And so it's not about removing ourselves from this experience or removing ourselves from this world. It's about transforming this experience and transforming this world. You see, whereas someone like Schopenhauer looks at the universe and goes, everything is suffering, everything just sucks. There's nothing we can do about it. We just have to, enjoy the little things as a temporary ease and the continuous suffering that we all are being subject to. Whereas Now we look at the Hegelian idea, Hegel's idea, which is completely opposite to that, in that we are God, we are all reality, coming to a fuller, more expressed version of itself as we come to an understanding of what we are. And so it's the same idea in the Neogenian system. We understand that this is a mathematical reality, and this is a system of energy and frequency patterns. And as it is a mathematical reality, what we are doing is we are exploring all of our various transformations. We are a system of mathematics that is going through an exploration of all of its patterns. When we come to the conscious realization that that is what's happening, we can select for the patterns that maximize quality of life. When we realize what we are, then we can select for the patterns consciously that can contribute to a quality of life infinitely beyond what we're experiencing right now. And for people who think, oh, life is suffering, life is horrible because there's always going to be, fighting and struggle. Here's the idea, is that there will always be struggle in the world. There will always be conflict in the world. And so people go, well, see, it's always going to be this hellish, horrible experience. No. Conflict and struggle does not have to be suffering. We look at things that cause suffering in this world, like how horribly people treat animals, how horribly people treat each other. There is an absolute abundance of unnecessary suffering in this world. However, conflict and struggle don't necessarily have to entail suffering. When you play a video game, guess what? There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of struggle. But it's fun. You wouldn't play the darn game if it weren't. And if there weren't any conflict or struggle in the game, that would be a really boring game. It's only because of those challenges and those conflicts and those struggles that makes the game fun. So conflict and struggle is necessary for growth and even enjoyment of life. But we can transform this world into one where it's fun. It's like playing a game. This is the difference. Right now, humanity is in survival mode. We can transform this world into an era of thriving, where instead of struggling to survive and fighting with each other, we realize, hey, why don't we actually cultivate an enjoyable experience for ourselves? And then existence becomes like a game. Existence is like a game. It's just a very shitty game right now because the programmers of this game are the rich elite billionaire class, and it's been corrupted by viruses of hateful religions and hateful ideas. So this game is one of corruption and viruses and glitches, and it's a very unsatisfying game to play. But we can change that and we can transform it. But that will never happen if we're all trying to escape, because the whole point is to play the game. What are you going to do if you escape from here? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? The whole point is to have this experience. We built this realm for ourselves unconsciously, not consciously, but we unconsciously generate it for ourselves to be able to discover what we are. That's the whole point of this, is to discover what we are. And then once we discover what we are, to cultivate an experience where we're maximizing the quality of life for everyone. People are so quick to want to escape from this reality when they don't realize that this reality exists for the purpose of our growth and fulfillment. And it leads to something beautiful. People are so busy. And that's why I love that quote from the Gospel of Thomas, when Jesus Christ says, if people say to you that the kingdom of heaven is in the sky, well, then the birds are going to get there before you. And if people say the kingdom of heaven is in the sea, well, the fish are going to get there before you. Rather, the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. He's basically saying that heaven that everyone's trying to find, that everyone's trying to look for, that everyone's trying to escape to, it isn't somewhere you go. It's not in the sky. It's not somewhere you go to when you die. It's right in front of you. It's right here. And he says this over and over and over in this gospel. Realize what is right in front of you. What you're looking for is right there. It's right in front of you. And that's the truth. All these religions that are trying to get to heaven, that are trying to reach nirvana, that are trying to ascend to the source, that are trying to find bliss, that are trying to find happiness, and they're going through all these different elaborate rituals and detaching from the world and blah, blah, blah. It's right here in front of you. You just need to wake up and realize it. And once we wake up and realize it, then we can transform this experience. And then guess what? It's going to be fun. Imagine if this reality, imagine if this world were utterly transformed so that it was enjoyable and that you were constantly having beautiful experiences, opportunities to grow, opportunities to learn, opportunities to create, opportunities to have enjoyment, opportunities for fulfill. If reality was just like a extremely pleasurable game and experience. Well, would people be obsessed with trying to leave and trying to escape? Of course not. People wouldn't be like, oh, this sucks so much. I want to extinguish myself. It's basically like spiritual unaliving. I want to extinguish myself. Or I just want to reach heaven. Or I just want to ascend to the source or something. No, people are like, this is great. This is amazing. And it would be an extremely fulfilling experience. And that's the point, is that we can build that. Life is just getting started. Like this phase that we're in right now is a very shitty phase because it's part of the beginning. We're just in survival phase, and we as Neogenians are trying to get humanity to the next phase, which is planetary civilization, which is where humans reach all awareness and realize, oh wow, hey, guess what? We're all in this together. We're all connected. We're all part of a unity. Why don't we start acting like it? Why don't we treat each other with empathy? Because we realize that we're all reflections of each other. And why don't we create a world society that is focused on maximizing the quality of life for everyone? And then guess what? Then we can start really living. We're not living right now. We're surviving. That's why it seems like a horrible world, because we're in survival mode. Of course, if you were stranded out in the wilderness with, animals trying to eat you and no food and no water, you're just in survival mode. And is that fun? No, that's not fun at all. But once you transform your environment into something positive, where you have protection and you have safety and you have food and you can start focus on living rather than surviving. So right now, humanity collectively is in survival mode. And so that's why it's a shitty experience, because we're in survival mode. But we're trying to move humanity from the phase of survival to actually living. We're not even really living yet. And then that's when all the amazing aspects of life and reality can start to unfold for all of us. And when is that going to happen? As soon as we choose it. As soon as we choose it. It could happen overnight if humanity made that decision. Now, of course, it's not going to happen overnight because humanity isn't going to make the decision like this, but we can start right now. That's why the Neogenian is the new beginning. It's about creating a new beginning, a new humanity, a new earth. How? Through a new consciousness. It's about first, how do you do this? First, realizing it yourself, because you have to realize it yourself. You can't help others or help transform the world until you come to that realization and understanding and that consciousness yourself. So take the time to understand these ideas and integrate this information for yourself so that you truly understand what you are, where you are, why you are here to a generally sufficient degree. Then it's about helping others do the same, helping others come to that realization themselves. That is how we begin to build a new world through a new consciousness. We can only have lasting, sustainable change through a new consciousness. Until then, people will be completely divided because that is what self-awareness does. Self-awareness is about division. It sees the other as a threat. It sees the other as an enemy. And the only cohesion that occurs is for survival reasons, where humans have learned, oh, you are like me, so I'm going to group together with you that are similar to me, and I'm going to see anything that is different from us now as a threat to our being. And so it's all about individuality, and if there's any collectivism, it's just collectivism between those groups that see themselves as self-similar. But when we reach all awareness, We realize that we're all self-similar. It's not just like, oh, well, you have the same skin color as me, or you're the same gender as me, or you have the same religion as me, or you're part of the same nation as me. No, you realize we are all universal citizens. We are all citizens of the universe. And so when we come to that realization, we're no longer divided and fractured and seeing each other as enemies, but we are seeing each other as co-creators of this reality. So that's why reaching a new state of consciousness is imperative. It's crucial. It's critical. It's necessary. There is no other way to do it. There's little changes we can make here and there. We can institute, new policies to help with a lot of things that are happening in the world that's bad, that are negative. We can do little things to help here and there. But for true, lasting, sustainable world change requires a shift in consciousness. And that is literally reaching a new level of consciousness. This is not a theory. This is not some, idea, vague. No, it's about literally having humanity reach a state of consciousness where they develop a new structure in the psyche that allows them to see themselves and all people and all existence as part of a unified network. And when that realization occurs, it's like when someone becomes self-aware, they realize, oh, that thing in the reflection isn't a human, another human, it's me. That's me. It's an I. It's me. Like a dog barks at its reflection because it thinks, oh, that's another dog that's in my territory. Well, if you realize, no, that's you. So likewise, instead of seeing others as being, oh, those are threats to my being, you go, oh, that's another aspect of our universal self that is expressing itself here. And so we have unity in diversity. And that's a very important aspect of what the Neostar symbol represents. It represents unity by the circles and diversity by the many rays emanating from those unified circles. And it also represents the emanation from the mental domain represented by the circles. The source is the central circle, and the holos, or the physical domain, is representative of the emanating rays of light. But it also very importantly represents unity in diversity. So let's remember that this world, I know prison planet idea, it's kind of popular right now, but it's not a positive attitude to have, because the immediate consequence of that is, oh, prison, how do I escape? It's not about escape. It's about transforming. It seems like a prison right now because we have manifested that collectively, but we can transform it right now. And that's exactly what we are doing as Neogenians through creating the new beginning. So I hope you enjoyed this, my friends. I have a lot more videos. Check them out on my channel. And as always, please like and subscribe because it helps spread this information around. Like I said, this is about spreading information, spreading knowledge. When you hit like, when you hit share, when you hit subscribe, that's exactly what happens. Follow me on Spotify, Dawn of the New Earth, to actually help spread our information on that platform as well. And I want to remind you that my new book is available right now, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. If you want to understand how to achieve a higher consciousness rationally, this is where to start. It is the first book in the Neogenian series, and it's available on Amazon right now. Link is in the bio. Link is in the description. I have Instagram on my mind. Link is in the description. And also, my second book in the series is available for pre-order right now on Amazon as well. It's out July 11th. And it's called Meta-Rationalism, the New Science of Mind, which is all about how we can understand metaphysics rationally and realize that this is a mathematical reality. But Neogenesis is necessary first to understand the concepts in meta-rationalism. Anyways, thank you so much, my friends. Oh, yes, and as always, hey, become a member if you want to support this channel. Helps out a lot. You get access to, there's a lot of stuff you get access to. Check it out. Click the button. It'll give you all the lists of the perks that you get, and it helps out a lot. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nusalina, Christopher Smith, Eon, David, and Fashida. Thank you all very much.